What's up YouTube? Today we are in the Boost Shack version 2 and this is I think my first project in here actually. Today I'm going to get started on finally doing my headlight conversion, and the option I'm choosing for my car personally is sticking with halogen bulbs for now. I may upgrade to LED in the future. The biggest thing I want to get started on is have the relay harness wired up, because then it at least gives you options to do whatever headlight bulb type option you want to do down the road. So I've got these Hella headlight housings. I looked for a really long time to try to find something that looked like the OEM style. These were what were in the car when I originally bought it. They are the Wagner sealed beam halogen. They look really period correct, is what they look like in the car. They've got this nice like dome bubble shape to them, which I personally really like. And it's really hard to find that in the aftermarket. The Hellas don't have nearly as much of that dome. They're relatively flat. But I looked for a really long time to at least find something that had the, whatever you call this, like cross hatching essentially, to look really similar. Because I personally don't like the look of the really overly clear modern headlights in these cars. I think it, in my opinion, it's just a little bit too modern, and my car for the most part looks period correct on the outside. So if you're interested, this is the part number, if I can get this to ever focus. This is the part number that I went with. There's a couple different options that are really similar, but these were the ones that fit the bill for me. There's some that are DOT rated and some that aren't, and the DOT ones have these little things on them. I don't know what any of that stuff's called, but these ones did as well, the old Wagner seal beam. So like I said, I was just trying to replicate this look as close as possible for my own application. Obviously you can go with whatever style headlight housing you want. Hopefully this will be a decent little tutorial just to kind of give you guys an idea of what it's going to take to install that relay harness. So even if you go through all the trouble of putting new, better headlights and bulbs in, if you're using the factory wiring, you stand a good chance of burning it up, because it's not really good wiring anymore. It's probably fairly brittle, and it's just not going to meet the demands of a modern headlight. So for that reason, this is just kind of strung across for now, because I'm doing some testing on the wiring and the new headlights. These Hellas actually have bulbs in them. This is the bulb that comes in the headlight already. I didn't realize that at the time when I ordered them. So I had purchased these Sylvania Ultras, the H4s or the 9003, essentially the same thing. So this is the high beam of just a single Wagner sealed beam that was that's been in the car the whole time. And then compared to the new setup, it's kind of hard to tell with it pointed on the workbench, but it's definitely a little bit wider, probably a lot wider actually. And this is high beam, so it's not super focused, but you can tell it's a lot more intense light output. And then this is the two side by side. Now this is the same test, but with the low beam. So you can see it just kind of, there's no real focus, not much of a focus anyways with the light, compared to the new setup, which has a very clear cutoff point, and the light spreads wider, a lot wider than the seal beam style does. So step one, removing headlights. You're going to take this inner fender cover off. I actually take both of them off. I take this upper one too. So you can see it in there if you haven't done this before. And obviously you got your little marker light there, which I've kind of rewired and replaced, so that's why there's more modern looking connectors there. So we're going to take this upper fender liner out, and that's like 5 or 6 screws, assuming you have all your screws in there, and it'll all just drop out. It's pretty simple to get that out. So now we have the upper fender liner out, which was 5 10mm screws. And when you have all this out, it's a really good opportunity to look up at those horns, or whatever you want to call them, up inside the fender and check for rust, because a lot of these cars like to rust up there, and that's pretty common and a pretty substantial bad place for them to rust. Mine seems to be okay. As far as I can tell, it's got a lot of undercoating on it, but I think it's pretty solid. So to get your headlight housing or assembly out, obviously you're going to want to unplug the main wire lead that goes into the back of it. Pretty simple, it's just a little plug-in snap plug. If you follow this wire, it's right around there. It's not too hard to get to, so you'll want to unplug that. And then you've got 4 8mm screws, like that little guy right there. And you get those 4 screws out, and there should be a rubber gasket between the assembly and the plate that it mounts to. So we have this side out. Pretty simple, those 4 bolts that I was mentioning. And if your car's anything like mine, and headlights haven't been addressed for a really long time, they're probably going to be pretty crusty looking and nasty. You got this little polished trim ring around the outside of it, and I already did the other side. I just took some steel wool to it and cleaned it up. It actually takes off a lot of that corrosion and gives it a kind of a dull polish, not anything super bright, but I figured even a dull polish with minimal effort is a lot better than one that looks really gross and scratched up and has like oxidizing going on. So to get this headlight out of here, you're just going to have a few little Phillips screws. I believe there is 3 of them, and then the whole headlight should just pop right out. So with those 3 little bolts out, obviously we got our trim ring separated, and then this piece will just pop right out. Unplug the connection at the back, and you'll be left with just the housing, if that's what you want to call it, on its own. So with the headlight out, you can pretty much do whatever you want at this stage as far as refinishing this. I hate putting pieces that look like this back in the car, even if it's just a quick touch-up, paint, scuff it and paint it. I'd rather do that and take the extra few minutes than throw it back in the car looking like complete crap. Quick comparison between the difference in the bulbs, or the headlights. Obviously this is sealed beam. This is one that you can actually change out the bulb, so if I wanted to ever go to HID or LED, I could technically use this modern style housing, whereas this one you are just limited to the bulb that's already built into it. So that's the main advantage, and then obviously these modern headlights focus the beam quite a bit better than the old ones. In some way or another, you're going to have to cut this original wire to get it out of the housing when using a relay harness, because that needs to get fed to the headlight, and this is going to be, I mean, you could still use this plug, but regardless you have to change this end. Okay, I have both the headlights in, and they are currently wired up. I'm still in the process of routing the wiring a little bit better just to make sure it's all clean and tucked. Obviously it's like a universal harness, so there is not always the ideal fitment of where connectors and things end up being, and partially because of that I didn't want to cut and re-crimp a bunch of stuff. Some of you guys may think this is a total cobble job of what I did, but in my opinion I think it'll work just fine. I opened up the holes in the back of the headlight housing. It's kind of messy. I just cut it with the cutoff wheel and then dremelled it out. There is a rubber boot on the back of the new headlight, so there won't be any water getting inside the headlight anyways, so it wouldn't even matter if that was wide open. I just cut a bigger hole in it just to feed everything through, and that way I wouldn't have to cut the new harness to get that to the actual headlight assembly through this little back cover mounting thing. So that's the way I did this. Obviously you could of course cut the harness and then run it through and then re-crimp it. I didn't really want to do that way. I wanted it to be able to unplug and plug things back in without necessarily taking everything apart. In my head, this is what made sense. Obviously, you could attack this a couple different ways. So we still got some wires hanging at the moment. That's all gonna get tucked up. And you guys might even have a completely different harness if you get some sort of universal headlight harness. This one is the one from Dapper Lighting. They have pretty good reviews. People generally seem to be happy with them. This is my first time using one of their products. As far as wiring goes, pretty simple process to get these all hooked up. So now, turn our headlights on. This is the high beam, so we'll start with the low beam. You can see it's a much wider light than what the old headlights were. Some of my old videos, I'm not sure if I got a real good shot of this before I started doing it other than the side-by-side comparison, but this is a much whiter light without being blue, which I like because I did not want any sort of bluish color. I wanted it to be just a factory look, but obviously a lot brighter. And now this is the high beam. So it's hard to get an idea of it really in here, and I don't even know if they're going to be adjusted properly or not, but they're definitely tons brighter than the old setup. The old ones are really amber in color, and they're just not bright at all. So I'm definitely happy with these. Once I get the wiring finished, I think I'm going to be very glad I did this. So hopefully this video was helpful to somebody out there that wants to do a headlight conversion on their Z. When it comes to wiring, obviously I don't even have anywhere near anything original going on in the engine bay, so my battery's in the trunk, so I had to wire the power wire off the starter for the harness. So I didn't really bother going into detail with that because my application is going to be a little different than the next guy. So that part, if you're competent at all with wiring, even just a little bit, I'm not great at wiring, but you'll be able to figure it out. If you own an old Z, you probably should know at least the basics of wiring. And if you know the basics, you'll be able to figure out one of these harnesses. They're super simple. So yeah, I'm happy with it. Once I get the car back in the ground, everything done, I'll have to figure out how to get the headlights adjusted and make sure everything is proper. I've got all winter to do that. We've got about 4 more months of cold, snowy weather before I get to drive the Z again. So I've started doing little projects like this to try to get through winter without losing my mind. So thanks for watching, guys. Until next time, we'll see you later.